Right, we're going to touch on this SPI Star Trader, a game that I've always loved, but maybe it hasn't met the expectations that it needed to. Because unlike an 1830 or a number of other games of the nature, this didn't get played a whole hell of a lot. Neither solo, and there's some reasons why it didn't work terribly well solo, but also even opposed. I could bring it to people, they'd be okay with it, but it wouldn't be something that people would remember very well, which I think is really a shame because in some ways it's one of the better economic transportation models out there. Okay. So anyway, I got this back in Ares magazine, and it was pretty awesome because it fits in with Universe. I don't know if you've ever played Universe, but it was kind of an attempt to make Traveler more detailed, but also more appealing to kind of the masses in the sense of like not being as realistic in a lot of ways. Which is funny because Traveler started out as trying to be space opera. Okay, so the goal in this game is you're playing a certain trading corporation, and it holds up to 6 people. And it uses an economic model which is reminiscent of something that I've covered, which is, if it's still kicking around here, business strategy, business management, that combination. And perhaps even more clearly with the model that shows up in Executive Decision, which is a later cleaning up of the business strategy, business management into a simpler game and taking away some of the stuff. Now this takes that same price model or a similar price model. It's a little different where you're putting bids in and that's going to affect the prices of commodities. But honestly, most games out there that deal with transporting stuff with commodity values, etc., really don't have anything like a model that makes any sense. It's like, oh yeah, you deliver this to here and you get X money or whatever. Well, this is different. Here, you're going to be tracking on each of these charts the value of each of 4 major commodities that the game's going to handle. So this is meant, it's kind of strange because this is meant to be a general economic model that you can use all over, little sectors in the universe. But the game design, this is by Nick Karp. This is the guy who did Vietnam, an outstanding game. And this one shows a lot of the same kind of cleverness to it. But anyway, the idea was sort of, hey, here's an example of what you could do. But the amount of effort you'd have to go in to identify a few key commodities that people would be transporting and etc. in order to run this as your economic model behind even just a small 6 system trading sector or whatever in a universe game is extreme. So using this as some sort of template for backdrops for some kind of campaign seems like a really, really tough sell to me. I don't know anybody who's done it, but I didn't know many people who played Universe in the universe. I knew people who took it and applied it to the Traveler universe because that was much richer in some ways. But okay, let us take a look at some of the components and what we have here. So SPI was kind of fond of putting a lot of information on the map sheet as much as they could. And a lot of the charts and tables are here, including this sequence of play. This prevents them from having to print out, an extra page or 2 for some of this information. On the other hand, it's not necessarily the easiest place to access it. Up here you have your supply and demand track. This is where bidding on different products and the price determination is really going to take effect. Each player has their own little track for assets. These run up, 0 to 9. They have 100-point counters. The counter flips over and has plus 1,000. That's not sufficient for the game, to tell you the truth, but you can always write down or give yourself, some kind of indicator. Each planetary system is broken up into a number of things. The main sort of starport is here. There's an on-planet section, which you'd go to if you have some sort of nefarious deeds to commit, smuggling primarily. Over here, safe berth, you can pay some money to prevent your ships from being sabotaged. System space, this is if you're out in the system basically hunting other players and trying to shoot their ships down. The market position is going to indicate your relative strength in any given commodity at any given location. By strength, I mean your ability to kind of pull the levers of power and pull strings to get extra commodities bought or sold or whatever. Each player has their own little slot where they can, and yes, I'm using plexiglass. It's because my map has gone through so much that it's basically taped together and it pooches all over the place. I only do this with economic games, right? You have these different spaces that show the number of warehouses that you have in the location and the number of factories to produce goods that you have in those locations. And you can only produce goods where the goods are abundant. And they tend to have a very low price where they're abundant because that's a production area. The nice thing about a factory, though, is it allows you to avoid having to buy goods. You just be producing them. Let's see what else we have. We have reputation. This is, all that you're worth. Yeah, this is did I have a reputation for F on the board? I forgot to put that one down. I'm going to have to look a couple of these up. This is going to be how well and legitimate your corporation is seen. And if you're kind of below 20, you're seen as shady. And as long as you don't do anything wrong, your reputation is going to just increase on its own. Once you get above 20, at the 25 to 40 level, for whatever reason, you're able to just make money off of your brand, as it were. I don't know. You just get some additional income each turn. All right, so let's look at the sequence of play here. So the first thing you do is at each location, you put in bids to buy and sell goods. To understand how that fully works, you're going to have to understand, and I'm going to have to because I don't remember it very well. I've reread the rules, but the mechanism itself is something we're going to explore during play. You have to understand how that track up there is affected by your bids. This isn't a simple bidding system like the executive decision one. This one actually has to do, it's more of a market-based bidding system where if I'm putting something for sale at a certain price and they're getting gobbled up, that's affecting the price in during the movement of the goods. It sounds like, oh, that could be really realistic and really complicated. The truth is it's actually neither, but it's better than many systems. Maybe not as good as the hidden bid one, but it can't be gamed in quite the same ways. I think it can be gamed still. All right. So what you'll be doing is writing down, hey, I want to buy alloys here, and you put a price. I'll buy them for $3 each because I can make, maybe $6 here or whatever. Okay. I don't have to declare how many I want to buy, though, although I could. Now, you can only buy and sell goods where there's an actual market for those goods. So, for example, here, there's no market for spice and there's no market for monopoles. They neither produce nor particularly want those goods. Likewise, here at Gamma Leporis, there's only one market. You go there to buy alloys, and that's really all that you're doing there. And if you're the Gamma Lepco, you go there to pick up your alloys that are being produced anyway. Okay. After you do the bidding, and this is secret, then you go to the initiative phase, And okay, now the bidding is made. Yeah, the bidding is written down before you actually get to the location at which you might be buying or selling, which is kind of an interesting thing. The initiative phase, one of the things you can bid for is how much money you're spending on trying to get an initiative order in the game. You always want initiative. When you're in a good initiative position, you have a choice to pick turn order, which chooses which position in the player's turns that you get to take certain actions. Other ones are done in initiative order. And basically, things that you'd want to go last in are done in turn order. So generally, players will pick a turn order where they're going last. There are some exceptions. Then we go to the news phase. And at this point, there's this pile of chits that are going to be stretched out on the game record track. There are events that come up later in the game. And each of these events has what connection you need to be able to investigate the event, and then how many turns forward it's going to be. So if during the news phase, any events that are set for the current turn are going to immediately take effect. And if they're events, and those will say EV on them, we read about them and see what they do to the world. Some of those are pretty potent. If they're opportunities, they get thrown back, I think, in the cup, and they might become available again. An opportunity that's still on the track on the turn that it comes due is an opportunity that was missed. Basically, nobody bothered to take advantage of that opportunity. Opportunities are often chances to get illegal materials or illegal spaceships. Okay. Then you roll some dice and figure out how many new events come up, and you put them on the board for future. And then people are allowed to pay money if they have the requisite connections. Now, the one had like a criminal one. Each corporation in the game has a set of connections. So for example, this one has political 7, business 1, criminal 7. And that means that they can pay to look at things with those ratings or less. There are other effects for those connections levels, but one of the factors is you can look at the news. Okay. Then you're going to do hyper jumping, and I may not go into the full details of the rules here. Because I'm not sure I want to know them, right? And I'm not sure you need to know them either. And I'm pretty comfortable with them. I'm finding in abstract. So in the hyper jump phase, at this point, each player in turn order gets to declare for each of their spaceships, and there's no real indication of whose ship is whose. That's written down on these sheets of paper that each corporation has, where it might want to jump to. And basically it sets itself up there, and they don't declare it ahead of time. They roll some dice. This number is going to be how hard it is to jump, okay? And you want this, I believe, to be a high number. And that's your chance of making it. Your crew, A, B, or C, crews also go to D, can add a bonus to that number to make the jump. And you're going to be rolling 2 dice against this. Also, if you have an augmented jump pod, you add a couple of points to your chance of getting there. If you fail to get there, well, bad things can happen, but basically, I think you usually end up just jump failed in the system space box of the place you were trying to get to. You're just too far out or something. I'm getting this confused with Freedom in the Galaxy, which I've played a little bit more recently, like 5 years ago or so. All right. Then we go to the transaction phase. And at this point, for each of these commodities, we're going to go undertake a comparison of what bids people made to this supply and demand marker to see who gets to buy and sell various goods. And in general, whoever put the biggest bid in is going to get to, or the lowest sales offer is going to get the first option to buy or sell something. Now, the decision between whether someone gets to buy or sell is a little twisted, and that's where there might be some fraying at the edges, where there might be room for players to kind of game the system a little bit. Okay. Then each player, and I believe this is in turn order, gets to do a series of special opportunities after the buying and selling from the bids comes into play. Which is, for example, if they have factories, their factories produce at this point. And they have to figure out where to put their goods. So, for example, this guy has 5 factories. He's going to produce 5 alloys each turn. He's got a warehouse. That'll hold 40 of them. So over time, that's going to load up, and he may have too many goods, which means he may have to continuously try to sell alloys here at 1 and hope he can sell some of them. You can sabotage opposing players' ships, warehouses, or factories. You can try to undermine somebody's market position and get rid of their advantages that they're getting there. You can hire agents. We start with one of the companies has an agent on the board, Dwarf. There's a whole pile of these here. They have special abilities listed here. Dwarf, for example, adds 4 to the die roll for any type of sabotage that he tries to be involved in. So that company, which is the Gamelepco, has someone who's particularly good at wrecking stuff. And he can try to keep their monopoly over there in that territory. That's a nice place to have a monopoly. It's the cheapest place to get alloys. There are other places. This is not too bad a price, but there's nowhere else you can actually build an alloy factory. And this is also tends to be very, very cheap, especially if he starts overproducing, if too many factories are going there. So you can make a pretty good margin on alloys. The question is, can you make the most money off of them? Well, the answer may be yes, simply because you're talking about a huge margin, a huge multiplier in terms of the value. If you're moving them to these places, you're getting 4 times the value that you're buying for them, maybe. And if you can keep other people out of there, that's pretty strong. So that sabotage can be a very powerful ability. You're also allowed to use an opportunity chit that you've looked at previously. That will allow you, to maybe pick up some goods on planet that are illegal. During the investment phase, you can buy various things. Warehouses, factories, spaceships. You can change your crew in and out. You can take a loan out. And you can buy connection levels and your reputation level and increase those. Okay. Now what we left out of here was the interception segment, which is during hyperjump. When somebody jumps into a system, if you're out in system space, you have the right to try to intercept them, prevent them from moving further, and then you immediately resolve a combat. And anyone else who's in system space can resolve a combat there too. That sounds dangerous, but kind of threatening, and we can see somebody is going to be doing a lot of this. But the problem with it is there's these patrol values. And those patrol values are going to be, there's, a government in place that's scouring system space. And if you're out there at the, after all the movement's done, there's a chance that they'll find you and you'll get in trouble. And your ship might be destroyed, or at the very least, you're going to lose some reputation for it. And combat is going to rely on 2 segments. First, an interception. As somebody comes in, you declare to intercept them. And then you go from round to round just shooting at each other. And the ships are built yourself using something very similar to the universe shipbuilding, basically a simplified version of it, where you have these different base hulls, and they're allowed a certain number of pods in this first column. And then you have a set of pods that you can buy or that you start with that, range from regular cargo pods that you need to carry anything with to some pretty significant military hardware that's very illegal and whatever. Okay, so initiative is going to be a combination of a bidding and a die roll. The connections levels, like I said, each corporation has these. They provide you with some additional levels. So first there's the news chits. Criminal is going to affect your sabotage chances. Political is going to lessen any effect of an inquiry into you. Inquiries happen if your reputation gets too low. And he can't suffer inquiries, though. What else? Political and business affect the cost of factories, or maybe the number of factories you can have. And political and business affect attempts to undermine market position. Okay. When you get new connections, your reputation changes. So each political connection gives you a +1 reputation. Each business connection gives you +2 reputation. Each criminal connection gives you -1 reputation. Obviously, if you're hovering down towards the bottom, it might be a good idea to get yourself down into the area where you immediately get boosted back up. So it might be to your advantage to buy some criminal connections when they're not going to cost you as much as if you've already built up some reputation. I've already largely explained the news event chits. What I haven't explained is the detail or the impact that they can possibly have. I've seen one which was the inflation chit. That one pretty much, if one person takes advantage of it and no one else does, the entire game is pretty much won or lost by that person. Well, it can be won by the person who understands it fully. On the other hand, if you're used to that chit and you see somebody doing the thing which the inflation chit demands, which is buying, which is taking out a huge loan, buying real goods with it, spaceships, presumably for the most part, but also other stuff, then if you go after them, you kind of have a clue that, hey, I should do the same thing to whatever extent I can. You might not be as prepared, but if that one comes out, it's pretty huge. If nobody notices that it came out, everybody basically gets their cash halved. The impressive thing is it also halves your loans, which is why that's a tremendous strategy. Okay. Other opportunities, though, are going to specify a planet that you have to be on to pick up a good. This guy starts out on the planet. He's already gotten this opportunity. He has a bunch of Tempest on board. I shouldn't have spice there. So I should actually have a little slip of paper for him saying that he's got 5 Tempests on board his ship. I don't have to worry about it because it's in the setup instructions, but that's okay. Okay. Spaceships have a number of values to them. Let's take a look. So what you have to do is you have to combine whatever pods you build with whatever the actual core of the spaceship has. And in some cases, the combat value. So an arsenal pod adds 7 to your combat value. Well, combat's one of the values here. So that's a big advantage. The parenthesized combat values indicate, hey, bonus combat value, I believe, if you have missiles. Yeah, if you choose to use missiles in combat. So what I do is I end up boiling this down and I put the name of the ship, its designation number. Those are, so for example, this one would be O2 Coral. And somebody has that. But this would be 11 Hawk. I put down the base hull type, the crew quality. This little S here is to indicate it has a streamlined hull. It has a bonus landing on planets. Then the pods it has. This has 2 cargo pods and an augmented jump pod. All the pods cost you 1 space for a pod, except for the augmented jump, because that's replacing a regular jump pod, which is just taken into account for free in the game. And then I do calculations. So for example, if this had weapons or whatever, so like if I wanted to calculate this guy, let me just show you how I do it. So that's a dagger with a battle comm and an augmented jump. So we've got a dagger. It's got a combat value of 5 and a protection of 4. So what I'm doing here is I put the 4. That's not going to change. So I have a combat value of 5. I also have a battle comm pod. That adds 6 combat to me. So now I have a combat value of 11. I have an intercept. I'm not sure. I think Battlecom affects intercept, but I don't know quite how. So the dagger has an intercept of 2. Anything other than 1's kind of good. It has no cargo value, I believe. The dagger itself has no cargo value, and over here it doesn't have any pods that give it a cargo. So it'll have a cargo value of 0. It has a crew. As a dagger, it's got a crew of 1, but the battle comm pod adds 2 to that. So it's got a crew of 3. And what I forgot to put down was, this is Eon Flash Core. I thought I had finished my setup, and I hadn't. It's got an A crew, which means, looking over here, it's going to cost me $4 a turn on salary. That's something interesting. So I have 3 crew members. It's going to cost me 12 per turn. And I write that down over here in my chicken scroll. Okay, so there's 2 options here, which is bounty and salary. I like to make up rules to games. So in this particular case, I'm going to probably combine the 2 somehow. Which is to say, normally you pay the bounty when you buy your ship, and that's your crew, and you never have to pay them again. I think that's unrealistic. I think paying them a continuous salary makes sense. So I'm going to play with the salary optional rule. That's how much you have to pay each turn. But then the bounty is supposed to go away. And instead, I'm going to make a, hey, when you first hire a crew, you have to pay their salary once more as a bounty. And the reasoning behind that is otherwise you can swap your crew in and out too much without any cost. And there are times when you're just like, you know, a B crew is good enough. I'm not making any long jumps. And then if you can just upgrade to an A crew very easily by just paying a little extra for 1 turn, that seems like people will tend to take too much advantage of it, and I don't like that. Okay. Actually, building a spaceship has to be done at a place with a shipyard, which is Tau Ceti, Epsilon Eridani, and Beta Hydri. You cannot build spaceships anywhere else. I think there may be a time investment in building a spaceship. You can buy and sell pods there. Okay, you build the ship. Yeah, you have to spend, it looks like a full turn. Let's see. The spaceship is moved from the shipyard to the spaceport in the same system during the investment phase of the following game turn. So it takes 1 full turn to build a ship. And that's really not that big a deal at all. You can also slap new pods on there. And pods don't require any time. You can trade and sell them. When you want to sell stuff, including a ship, either a ship or pods or whatever, because you're exchanging them, you roll 3 dice, subtract the spaceport class, and then 10 times that value is going to be the percentage of the base value of the ship that you get. So if you're selling something at Mu Hercules, you might actually get some decent money for it. The average on 3 dice is, I think, 10.5. With no minuses, you're probably going to get about your 100%. It doesn't strike me as terribly valuable to buy spaceships to try to sell them at better places, because you pay list price here, and you're probably not going to get much better than list price on average there. You can make much more money in other ways in this game. Already largely talked about hyperjump except for the failure. You stay at your point of origin. And you're just flipped over and you're not, nobody can find you in system space. You're out too far. Basically, at the end of the turn, you recover and you're back in that spaceport. Combat itself. Okay, I haven't explained how fire combat itself works. So, at the beginning of combat, it's kind of this game of chicken. After you intercept someone, which I should explain how that's done. So the intercepting and incoming players each roll a die and they add their interception rating. And whoever has the highest value gets to choose whether the ship gets away or is successfully intercepted. And that's basically the two-player situation. There might be a difference there. Then each player in initiative order gets to declare whether or not they're shooting at the other guy, at another guy who's in the system space box. Now, there's a problem. When you do intercept somebody who doesn't want to be intercepted, you take a potential loss of reputation. And if you shoot at someone who hasn't shot at you, you take a much larger loss of reputation. Okay, combat itself is handled by, let's see. Firing player declares which ship he's firing at, whether it's normal or missile fire. He rolls a die. He adds the normal or missile combat strength to the die roll. This will be cross-referenced with the protection rating. I'm looking to see if we have a combat chart here to cross-reference it in. To find the number of hits. Okay, there should be a combat chart somewhere. And I'm just not seeing it. Ah, here it is. Okay. So you add up one die plus the combat rating of the attacker compared to the defender's protection rating. And if you get a positive value, that's a number of hits the defender has to allocate to his ship. Each pod can take 2 hits. Once it takes 1, it's damaged and no longer has any effect. And the ship itself... I'm not sure how much the ship itself can take. Yeah, I don't know where that is. I don't know if they can only take 1 hit or if... All right, well, I'm having trouble finding that. It's probably under the damage rolls here, yeah. Okay, pods take 2. A hull takes a number of hits equal to its protection rating, and then it's destroyed. Now, there's another way to destroy a ship, though, which is when you fire missiles at it. If you're firing missiles, you roll a die and add the ship's normal missile combat capacity to the die roll result. Yeah. Then you roll a die again after you do your normal combat die roll. If this second result is equal to or less than the number of hits that the target incurred, you've completely vaporized them in this round. So missiles give you a higher combat capacity, but they do give you a chance of just eliminating your entire enemy. This is bad because when a ship eliminated by missiles, all its commodities on board are destroyed at that point. If you destroy hulls or you destroy a ship by normal laser fire, whatever is left over, you can salvage. And that's what's covered here. Whoever's left over after the battle can pick up whatever's left over. And they can flush their own stuff. All right, I need to take a break, which is good because my battery's going out too. The trade mechanism is very important, and I want to be able to cover it somewhat reasonably, better than I seem to show with talking about combat there. So trade is the heart of this system, or of the game. It's the core system, at least in times that I've played it. Now, this particular time I'm playing with the special, with some corporations that may make trade less the absolute thing in the game, but we'll see. So the way it works is for each commodity, you work your way through the commodities one at a time. You're going to roll 2 dice, and then you add whatever modifier is listed on the commodity. So this one has a +1. Most of them are going to be negative. That's going to give you your starting position. Now, theoretically, if nobody does anything, that's what's going to happen to the price. It's going to go down 4. It can't go below 1 or above 20. Now, if the marker is to the right of the 0, if it's a positive value, up here, not down here. These will always be negative if that's positive, and positive if it's negative, just to confuse things. If it's at that positive spot on the track, then someone who is, let's see, I just looked this up. Someone who is trying to buy has the first opportunity. Now, whatever price they're buying at is now compared. And so, for example, if I wanted to buy, let's say we did this one, alloys here at a price of 1, that would mean that I can buy only so many as the price would still stay at 1, which takes me to this box. So I could buy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. However many I buy, I pay the price that I listed. Now, the person who put the highest valued buy order gets the first option. So if I put a buy in at 2, I could buy down to here instead, and I'd get the first chance to buy. So the bigger the order, the bigger the bid I put in, the more of them I'm allowed to have, and you know, the earlier I'm allowed to get them. That keeps happening as long as the price stays on the positive side of the marker. Once it swings over to the negative side, we stop dealing with buyers, and we go to the seller who's willing to sell it at the lowest price and handle his transactions. It's quite possible that if people put in better bids than you do, right? Higher to buy, lower to sell, that you may not get a chance to buy or sell simply because the price may move beyond, you know, where your bid is. So that's something you have to keep an eye on when you're considering what your bids are going to be. And this is done for every commodity, and each player gets their opportunity in their proper turn. Now, their turn order here is going to be based on how much they're willing to pay or how low they're willing to sell something at. It's a hard system to game, but there are some little edge areas, I think. I seem to remember that there were. Okay. After you go through all that, wherever this marker is sitting, so like if I had bought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these, I'd be, that marker would then be sitting at the -2 space after my purchase. If it's there after all the purchases and sales, we actually record it, the change on the track. But we don't record it until after all purchases and sales are done. Okay. You cannot move this marker off this track. The -18 and +18, no matter what, those are absolute limits as well. Okay. If you buy or sell 6 or more units of a legal commodity, you can roll 2 dice. And you're only allowed to buy or sell in any given market, in each commodity. If you roll, less than or equal to the amount of units that you bought or sold, your market position goes up. And what that means is if you have no market position, you put a little marker at dealer. If you're already a dealer, you move up to contractor. If you're a contractor, you move up to manager unless somebody else is the manager. If someone else is the manager, you drop them back down to contractor. You don't get to go up. Those positions give you certain advantages. The dealer, nothing. It may be part of your victory conditions. Contractor, after everybody's bid's been revealed and executed, and the commodity's price has been fixed, the contractor can buy or sell up to 5 units of that commodity at the current market value. He can't do this if he put a bid in. The market manager has that ability, but he also has the ability to not have to look at anyone else's, to not have to put a bid in. He can wait, ask for everybody else's bid, and then put his own bid in and undercut them or whatever. In addition, he can combine a bid with his contractor ability. So that's a very, very potent position to be in. But only one person can be in it in each place. You have to store stuff. Warehouses, I believe, hold 10 big goods. So there's 2 types of goods in this game. Goods that weigh stuff and goods that don't weigh stuff, basically. Goods that take up space and goods that don't. Alloys and isotopes take up space. Monopoles and spice do not. Illegal commodities, weapons take up space. Tempest does not. This is just, it's in the rules, but it's basically something you just have to remember about these. Things that take up space are limited. So a cargo pod can carry 2 units of stuff that takes up space. And that's where we have these cargo numbers here. This can carry 4 units because it has 2 cargo pods and it has no base of its own. A warehouse can hold 10 units of stuff that takes up space. A ship or a warehouse can hold an infinite amount of stuff that doesn't take up space, but you have to have some place to put stuff that doesn't take up space. In addition to that, you can't store stuff that's illegal in a warehouse. Okay. So some of the companies, I'll start with, and others may buy, a passenger pod. A passenger pod allows you to take passengers from one location to the other. If you want to see where passengers want to go, you add up the 2 systems spaceport classes. So, for example, from here to here, there would be 7 passengers who want to go between there. I could take my share of those. I think it's in the opportunity phase, yeah. In whatever order that's being taken, which is an initiative, yeah. And I get $5 for each passenger that I agree to take there. I must try to make that jump. If I fail to make the jump, if I fail on my die roll, because I have to try, I do get penalized double the amount that I took from them. And then I'm under no further obligation. Each passenger pod can hold 2 passengers. There's a problem with passenger pods. They require a crew member. If I'm getting $10 per passenger pod for 1 crew member, that's not a bad deal. Even with an A crew, I'm only paying $4 a turn for that, so I'm making money. But I'm not making a lot off passengers. If I have a lousy crew, I can make more, though. Okay. Smuggling. Sometimes, particularly from the opportunity ships, you have to smuggle stuff. In order to do that, you have to land on planet. When you enter an on-planet box, you roll 2 dice. You add 3 to this roll if you have battle pods or bottle rockets, and 2 more if your ship is streamlined. If you roll greater than the security rating, you make it in. If you roll exactly equal to the total, you're hauled into the system spaceport. You lose 2 dice of reputation, and you dump any illegal commodities or pods. If your ship is illegal, you're blown up. And if you roll less than the security rating, the ship is lost no matter what, and you lose 3 dice of reputation. And that would be the same, I guess, with the other. Hey, we didn't talk about the reputation loss for combat. Or we didn't successfully. Intercepting, you roll 2 dice for each reputation you lose unless you have a battle comm pod. When you actually fire on a ship that attempted to avoid interception, it doesn't have to be just first fire, you lose 3 dice of reputation. These are things that really prevent you from going a pirating. You don't want to lose reputation. In particular, because if you're a corporation and you get in the inquiry zone, something bad happens to you. Now, there's one exception to this, which is there is going to be one of the corporations, McGrady's True, which is just a bunch of, it's a mutinous ship, basically. And it doesn't operate as a regular corporation at all. And they showed up this time. Okay, so when you sell illegal goods, you sell them on the black market table. And you're told where to sell them, and you roll a die and see how much money you get per unit. So that Tempest that I have, wherever that's supposed to go, it's probably worth around 30 hectatrans each. If I've got 5 Tempests, that's an extra $150 that corporation has sitting on its money. Agents. Okay. You can attempt to acquire an agent. You roll 2 dice. And that multiplied by 5 has to be less than or equal to the amount of money you committed to buying an agent. If it is, you get one at random. And then you have to transport them as an individual. They don't take up any space. It's not that they're very tiny, it's that they're serving as part of the crew or something on a ship. You're allowed to take out loans. Your loans are going to be based, now this is actually kind of interesting. Your loans are going to be based on your reputation. The amount you can take per loan is based on your collateral, though. 100 for each ship, 20 for each warehouse, 20 for each factory, plus however much cash you have on hand. That's how big a loan you can take. The interest is going to be based on your reputation level. It is, what? You subtract your reputation level from the principal of the loan. If it's going to be a 4-turn, you have 2 flavors of loan, 4-turn and 8-turn. If it's a 4-turn loan, you divide that difference by 20. If it's an 8-turn loan, you divide it by 10. And that's going to be the amount of interest you must pay each turn until the loan's paid off. Now, if you take out an 8-turn loan and only hold it for 4 turns, you actually get a bonus there, which I really dislike. There's just something goofy there. You're only allowed 1 loan at a time. And you get penalized if you fail to pay your interest payments. So your interest payments are reduced by your reputation level. But you will always pay $1 per turn in interest minimum. Factories, they have a particular price. It's going to be 10 hectatrans plus 5 times the commodity's current market value to build a level of factory. Obviously, for the cheaper goods, that 10 hectatrans is a fair amount of the price. For more expensive goods, it's probably not going to be that big a deal, but it's hard, it's a significant amount of cash to come up with some good factories there. You can sell factories to other players. You can sell it to the market. You just get 5 hectatrans times the price. And you can sell your warehouses too. This is important because the end of the game condition is often X amount of cash, and that's it. So warehouses cost you 20, and they may be sold, traded, or loaned. Okay, I don't see a cost. I don't see a return cost for them. So maybe you can't sell them back. Unless you can find a player to do it. Sabotage shit. I never do this, but okay, if you want to sabotage an enemy spaceship, warehouse, or factory, it costs you 20 hectotrans times the system's law level. And you roll 2 dice twice, adding your criminal connection to each roll. The first result is going to be on the effect table of the sabotage table, and the second will be on the reputation level. So the effect's going to be an amount of damage that you do to something, and the reputation effect is going to be a hit to your reputation, but the OP minus 8 indicates that you can choose some other person to blame for it, possibly including the original victim. Now, so you add your criminal connection, yeah. No more than one sabotage attempt may be made against anything in the space. Okay, so hits on a spaceship are treated as hits on the spaceship out in space. A warehouse is how much commodity you can destroy in that warehouse. A factory is going to be how many turns the player's factory complex is knocked out of business. Now, factories have an additional modifier to that table, though, if I recall correctly. I thought they had a penalty for each level. Yeah, I'm not seeing it, so. Which is a reason, I guess, not to collect your factories together, but I thought there was a penalty for that. Okay. Your reputation itself is going to run between 0 and 40. I've already pretty much talked about reputation. Except that you can improve it during investment. It costs you 20 hectotrans to try to improve it. You roll a die and your reputation goes up that level, that number of spaces. But if you roll a 6, you don't get anything. Okay, if you get down to the inquiry space, you have a potential for getting hit with an inquiry, though. And there should be an inquiry table. You roll a die here. What is the modifiers? If your political connection is 1 through 5, you subtract 1 on the inquiry table. If it's 9 through 10, you subtract 2. If you don't have any political connections, someone else can throw theirs in, either for or against you. The way this is worded is really kind of annoying, but yeah. And basically, at a 1, your reputation jumps back up to well above the inquiry level. Otherwise, you get some potential problems, but your reputation may go up. You may get fined, you may get difficulties there. Okay. Presumably, a player could renounce being a corporation, because that's what kind of McGrady's crew does, but I don't think that's a reasonable option, you know, for most of these. Negotiation. Okay. I'm going to need to switch batteries, so hold on. Yeah, I had this funny idea about negotiation in games, which was, okay, on one level, you can make any deals you like, and nobody cares about them. But if you want people to worry about them, you can make either written or verbal agreements. And this game follows that. So it makes a differentiation between verbal and written agreements. If you make a verbal agreement, the penalty is less for violating it. So if you end up violating an oral agreement, you lose 1 die worth of reputation levels. If you violate a written agreement, you lose 10 reputation levels. But if you make a written contract, somebody has to pay $10 for lawyers. Parties can agree to suspend their agreements. They can pay each other off to negate them, whatever. You can exchange commodity units only if you have storage facilities that you can move them between ships, warehouses, whatever. Okay. The game provides you with 2 scenarios in general. Normally, I've played what's called the free scenario, which is really actually the more limited scenario in some ways, where each player starts out with the same ship, the same pods, sort of a random assortment of connection levels, and they start wherever the hell they like. Okay, that's interesting enough. The second scenario has 2 flavors. It's the corporation scenario. One flavor is you pick the number of players, you roll a die, and those are the corporations you're going to play with. And there's a list of corporations here. The other is you roll 2 dice, each player rolls 2 dice, and they get the corporation that they got the number of. Well, I mixed the 2. This may not work, but I don't think the corporate scenario is fair anyhow, in and of itself. So there may be balance issues with what I'm doing. What I did was, if you rolled the same number as someone else previously has rolled, you get the basic conditions. This is important because you're rolling 2 dice for corporations, and you're almost always going to see like 6, 7, and 8, and you probably aren't going to see, the widely varied numbers happen a lot. So with 6 players, which is what I'm going to play with, there's a fair chance you're going to have some duplicates, and I don't want to roll and re-roll and whatever. So if you manage to come in as the second person to roll the same number, I just handed you the default starting position and default victory conditions. Each of these corporations has its own special cases, and I'll go over these when I start my actual play, because I want to go into the details of each corporation and what it's trying to do there more. They each have a set of market positions available, commodities, factories, warehouses, whatever. There are some weird ones, like these anarchists and McRady's crew, Archangel Lines, which isn't allowed to transport anything but passengers, just as a restriction against it, which makes the game much, much harder, to tell you the truth. But then being a pirate like McRady's crew is also kind of very different from everything else. And we're going to have we have at least one of the very interesting ones in there. And yeah, I ended up kind of lucky where there was only one overlap, so I only have one person with the starting thing. Now, with the starting game, you have a couple of different ways you could end the game. One is get to 1,000 hectotrans. Yeah, you can sell off all your ships and everything and, make your 1,000 that way. You can't do it right off the bat. You don't have that much value. So you're starting with a clarinet, which is worth 160. And you're starting with, I think, 300 hectotrans in cash. So you're not going to have a whole hell of a lot there. Say your ship's worth 200, but you're halfway there. The other way is to play to a fixed time limit. And again, people would just add up their cash. Either case, this is somewhat unsatisfying. It's the same problem I have with Merchant of Venus, which is all I have to do is reach cash level at a certain point. I feel like these are operating corporations. They shouldn't just sell off all their goods and say, yeah, I win because I made this limit. Okay. On the corporate game, most of the corporations have 2 to 3 choices. Well, they all have 2 to 3. So, for example, let's take a look at Monogram Industries. Their first option is 2,000 hectotrans in assets. This is more than you have to make with the starting, the default position, which is one reason. They start with a more stronger play position, but they have a harder total to reach. Of course, they start with probably $1,000 worth of assets, right? 1,500 hectotrans in assets for B, with a reputation level of 30 and factories producing at least 25 units of monopoles a turn. Well, now wait a minute. If I'm producing 25 monopoles a turn, right? I don't know how cheap monopoles can possibly get, but let's say they get down to 5. So 25 times 5 times 5, that's a value of 625 right there, just for those factories. Now, this is a difference of 500 hectotrans. I could turn and sell those factories for more than the difference between them. So this victory condition is already, by default, probably more valuable than the previous one, but it does let me at least keep my corporation somewhat intact, right? But I need this reputation level of 30 as well. And victory option C is 1,200 and factories producing at least 10 units in all 4 commodities. And again, if I calculate out, if I gotta have those factories, that's probably worth close to the 800 bucks we're looking at. So, you know, some of these victory conditions may not really give you an additional option. Some of them do, though. Most of the ones I've been looking at looked okay. So, for example, this one here, 2,500 in assets, 1,000 in assets, and market manager in all markets for 1 commodity. Well, that's pretty cool. Market manager is hard to get to, but saving me 1,500 bucks, wow, I think I can do that, you know? So that looks really appealing to me. Unfortunately, this guy is not one of the players that I have for this time. I'll send this up. I don't know if I'm going to get started today. I hope so, but I got to go out tonight. I'm kind of scared.